Welcome to episode 4 of the Cult of Pedagogy podcast. Cult of Pedagogy is a website devoted to building a community of people who are obsessed with education. If you're a teacher nerd, you will find a home at www.cultofpedagogy.com. This is Jennifer Gonzalez. I am your host. I am also the boss of Cult of Pedagogy, and I would like to tell you about episode 4. It is a special episode, and I think it's really powerful. I was reviewing a book a few months ago called The Reason I Jump, and it was written by an autistic boy, and it's an incredible book, and I urge you to get it and look at our review. But I was talking to a friend of mine who has an autistic daughter, and we're going to call her Leigh for purposes of anonymity, which I'll get into in a minute. Anyway, I told her about the book, asked her if she'd read it, and she said she had, but she just wished that people who read it had some actionable items to take away from it. And so I wasn't sure what she meant, and we got to talking, and I asked if she would be willing to sit for an interview so that we could talk more about what she wishes her daughter's teachers knew. So I think you're going to find a lot of interesting stuff. She initially did not want us to run the episode because she felt that if her daughter ever heard it, she'd be really embarrassed by it. So we decided that if I bleeped out her daughter's name, their anonymity would be preserved and it would be okay. So I am really grateful that she's allowing us to run the episode. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you have about an hour to listen. And here is my conversation with Leigh. First, I want to get terminology straight because I know that I learned somewhere not too long ago that what is appreciated the most by people who have kids with special needs is if you put the adjective after the person. Does this sound familiar to you? Like, as opposed to saying an autistic child, you would say a child with autism. Does that sound?
There is a huge push of people who do that because they do want people to see that their child is not a diagnosis than a child.
Yeah.
I'm lazy. I say she's autistic.
Right. You know, well, and that's the thing. It depends on the person,
It depends on the person. It depends on how sensitive you are. I'm not, there are people who are very sensitive about their children. They don't want their children to know that they have, there's all sorts of different ways people parent.
Yeah.
We've never been that way. So, I mean, since the day she got her diagnosis, the whole family is like, we use the word autism. She has autism. That is how she is.
Yes.
And we don't see it as a label. We just see it as a part of her.
Yes.
So you can use whatever you want with me because I'm cool with it.
Okay. You're the most laid back person I know on the planet, so
I'm
pretty sure about that. So, just if you could just give us a little bit of background on your daughter in terms of how you started to figure out that there may be a need for a diagnosis and what exactly is her diagnosis and just a little background.
Okay. When she was an infant, even as early as probably about 6 months, I knew that there were some oddities. Now, I was with her all the time, so that was what made a difference. Very susceptible to sound, noise. I mean, by the time she was about 6 to 9 months old, I couldn't use any electronics in the house. No vacuum cleaners when she was there, no blenders, no hand mixers, nothing that made a electronic noise. It would set her off screaming for hours. So, there was little things like that, but everybody else would say to me, oh, you're a first-time mom, because she hit all of her developmental milestones. She actually, right now, I mean, she's diagnosed with classic autism, or PDD-NOS, which means pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. Oh. So it's kind of a catch-all.
It's real generalized.
Yeah, it's a catch-all phrase for, when they just can't quite fit you into the right box.
Yeah.
But she was, at 1 year of age, she could say the word no. And the thing that was tricky about her is she could label. She could tell you the difference between an orangutan and a gorilla or whatever type of monkey. Like, she could
really
differentiate between the different monkeys. She could spell the word stop, no. She could count up to 25. And this is all by the age of 1. Yeah. But you ask her for juice, she couldn't answer. but it was hard to get that across to people. So she wanted a drink. She couldn't ask you for a drink. She couldn't say juice. If she wanted something, she would just sit and cry. Or if you said, do you want juice? She would just look at you. And if she didn't, she could say the word no, but she could not figure out anything past no conversationally. And in fact, we didn't get her saying anything other than no conversationally until she was about 3.
But she would point to things and name them, but in terms of
she
interacting
could point to them
with
and name
you,
them.
yes.
She could name all the letters. She had all that kind of development, which is what made it tricky. And she was also a girl, and we were from a smaller town, and you know the ratio, boys, girls, you know. So people kept saying...
what ratio, boys, girls? More autistic
there's
boys?
There's more autistic boys. It's like 4 to 1.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, well, that's what it used to be, but now they keep changing the ratio. So sorry, I don't even know. You know, it's like 1 in 89, 1 in 166.
The diagnoses are getting more refined, right?
Yes.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but when she was diagnosed, it was 1 in 4. So I had even mentioned autism to our pediatrician at one point, and he said, "Look at her. She's just very smart, and she's a girl. So you're just a first time mom. Just." You know, you need to read some of these parenting books. So we didn't actually get the diagnosis until she was 3.
Okay.
I think so.
How did that feel, having them kind of brush it off and say you're just being a first time mom?
Well, kind of rude.
Yeah. I mean, did it worry you that there really still is something? I think.
I mean, I knew there was something. You know, it's a catch-22, really, because if you think about it, nobody wants to hear, "Oh, your child's got this lifelong, you know, whatever." So you're like, "Oh, okay, excellent. Right. My kid's okay." That's what the pediatrician just said. It's just me.
Right.
And you know, as a mom, you probably realize, you know, you would rather it be just you than your kid.
But it's scary to bring your kid to the doctor thinking something is not right here, and you want them to say, "Here's what it is, and here's how you fix it."
And here's how you fix it.
It's nothing. It's your imagination, right?
But you know what? You'll take your imagination, because actually, you know, it was kind of funny because my husband, he had the whole different. Like, when she got diagnosed, I was happy. When we finally got the final diagnosis, I was like, "Thank God, somebody heard."
Yeah.
Now my husband, on the other hand, he kind of lost it, because up until that point he was like, things are good.
Yeah.
But you know, it's just how you, I don't know what the word is. I guess it's how you grow. You know, you know, it kind of slammed him. He was able to ignore it. He was at work most of the time.
Preferred to just be in a little bit of denial.
Yeah, she's fine. Yeah.
So, but when you got the diagnosis, then it's a to-do list. Then it's like, here's what I need to learn about, and
kind of, sort of.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, well, here's a website. You can go out and research.
Yeah.
But, you know, which I feel bad for, you know, we have resources. I'm fairly well educated. My husband's fairly well educated. So it wasn't really a hindrance for us. Right. I mean, I'd say within 2 weeks, you know, I had gone out and purchased 20 books and read all of them, and had my... You know, my plans, my visual schedules, my this, that, all the appointments scheduled. But I could see, you know, there are families who don't necessarily have that kind of background.
It might take them a while to even realize they need a diagnosis in the first place.
It would be a struggle. And I meet families now. I mean, I meet people, and they're like, "What do you do?" And I just feel like, oh my gosh, because you know, they have a 5 or a 6-year-old that they haven't done anything with. Just because. And I think my daughter has improved. I mean, I think if we retested her testing would probably be higher than what it was when she was 3. But then, you know, once I got the testing, 5 days a week she was in therapy. Plus, I was doing all the home therapies. You know, I would get the books. We would do the floor time. You know, one book even said, in a 12-hour day, your child should only have 15 minutes every 4 hours where she's not being stimulated. I am not kidding. I'm like, where they wanted constant interaction.
I'm guessing TV was not an option for
we had no TV. No, I wish.
I know.
Although we did sometimes rely on Thomas because,
oh
my God. But yeah, so I think it was for like a year.
Well, because I'm doing the math here because I know your family, and I'm thinking around this time would have been when you had your son too, and so you would have had a baby and then an older daughter that you had to keep stimulating.
Yes. Yes, all
Constantly,
the time.
yeah.
Constantly, yeah. Which is why, he's got some issues too. And siblings have a rough go, really.
Yeah.
I mean, because, he spent most of his afternoons, well, until he was 3.5, he spent most of his afternoons in therapy offices, in the lobbies with me.
Waiting. Ugh.
So, what kind of stuff can you do? So he missed out on more physical, but of course he's a better reader. He's got so
Yeah.
he's picked up other skills.
Right. So you got her started on therapy and home therapy, and then when did she start going to just regular school?
Regular school.
Yeah. Did she just enroll in a regular kindergarten, or?
We started in an early start program when
Uh-huh.
she was 3.
Is early start different from Head Start?
Yeah, Head Start I think is a more financial based. Early
Yes.
Start is developmental based.
Got it.
So she started at the preschool in a public school system at the age of 3, and she did that for 3 and 4, and then we moved her due to all sorts of issues to a private Montessori school when she was 5.
Mm-hmm. Let's
And
talk about those issues. were the teachers in that first school, do you feel that they were well trained
well,
for her needs?
no.
Okay.
And I'm not sure. I think early start teachers, well, I don't know. I can't say this. I don't work in the school system, and I
Right.
never have. So my experience with the early start teachers, now I haven't seen that in the school that she's currently in.
Mm-hmm.
There was tons of turnover. In 1 year, she had 3 early start teachers.
Wow.
It wasn't a big, people at the school that we were at currently, I never met the principal, even though I tried calling her several times. And there was lots of things that I needed to address. Lots of times I was writing to the special needs director. I wouldn't say, they're young. All the early start teachers were fresh out of school, which is not a problem.
Right.
I think that's...
But it shows probably a lack of experience.
But it shows
Yes.
a lack of experience, and for some reason they weren't, like, the first year we went through 2, and the first one she was excellent. She was really good. She took the time. She tried to get to know all the children. But then when she left, they brought in another teacher, and this teacher, and this one cracked me up. As a teacher, this will crack you up. So she, one night, called me at home, crying on the phone, and she said, "I need you to come over." And I was like, "Come over where?" And she goes, "To my house." And she had a little boy, and I knew that. And she said, "I think my son is autistic, and I think I would just die." Now, she told this to the mother. Can you believe that? Now, she was young, and I had my children later in life, so I could, and I still find it funny.
Yeah.
I still, to this day, laugh about this conversation, because I'm like, really?
Wow.
Would you really say that to someone? But,
She was clearly in the middle of her own head at that point.
yeah, and it just wasn't, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah. And a scared mom, and didn't know what to do, and, and I told her I couldn't diagnose her son, but I'd go over and talk to him, and, anyway, so, but that kind of shows you, that was what, and the things that she was seeing were just things that she had seen my daughter do, but it wasn't all the time,
Yeah.
One of the things I do as a parent is, like, before school starts, or actually usually I do it after every break too. So if there's a 2-week break, Christmas break,
Right.
whatever. Usually not spring or fall.
Something kind of longer.
Yeah. Usually it ends up being about 5 to 7 pages. 5 to 7 page report as to all of her cognitive levels, any kind of behavior issues that we're seeing, like, basically I just break down in everything. And I give it to the teachers just because I feel like it's information. Some of them read it, some of them don't, but I feel like at least they're given an idea of where the kids are. Yeah.
So you do that. You give the teachers that at the beginning of the school year and after long breaks.
Uh-huh.
And I'm trying to get us back to the train of thought that got you there. You were saying...
some teachers read it, some teachers don't.
Yeah.
And the really good teacher had read it and was...
Now, how could you tell she read it? Because I'm guessing that teachers who read it will do things that make you realize they did.
Oh, yeah. Because I'm very specific. I make them extremely detailed. Now as she's getting older, I don't need to do as much. But, when she was 4 or 5 or even 6, I could go down the list and say, these are the colors that she does not want in her crayon box. These are the reasons why. They remind her of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
These are the sounds that she cannot tolerate, and these are the reasons why, because of X, Y, Z. If you have her near a window, you're going to experience these issues, versus if you have her near a fluorescent light. These are the. So I mean, I would get very, very detailed. And you can see which teachers, like sometimes you could walk in and there she is next to a fluorescent light with the radiator humming in the background.
Yeah.
Versus,
Yeah.
or her stimming. Do you know what stimming is?
No.
Stimming is kind of like it's called self-stimulation. And the reason why the book, the reason I jump, he talks about flapping.
Yeah, I think I just read that.
Okay, so flapping or jumping.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all stimming.
Okay.
And it's a way that they regroup.
Yeah.
And so if she gets very...
You said this is STIM. That's
STIM,
short for
like
stimulation.
stimulation.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's things they do for themselves to regulate and...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And they need that.
Yeah.
Now they can control it. Like has figured out, like when she was younger... Really, her stimming was she would spin in circles, like constantly, just spin.
Yeah.
She can control that now. She very rarely spins. When she does spin, she spins at home.
Yeah.
She can kind of, but it's a building process. So like, or swing, there's all sorts of, flapping. You'll see a lot of the flat hand flapping.
Yeah.
And she still, if she gets really carried away, she'll flap.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
How does that play out with different types of teachers? Are there teachers that have different reactions to her doing things like that? Yeah.
Funny you ask. A teacher that we really had problems with.
Yeah.
Had huge issues with her stimming. And the funniest thing was, and to the point where, and this was actually at a private school, to the point where we were having meetings where I was begging them, I'm like, I don't have another place to put her because it was such a weird spot in the year.
Yeah.
Just deal with it. Just please do what you can. I hired an aide just to come in and sit with her.
Wow. And this was because they were complaining to you?
About the stimming. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing, and here's the key that I think all teachers need to understand is people are comfortable with what they know. And I know for a fact in that classroom that the teacher had, she had a little kid that kept biting. Bit everyone in the classroom. Just a nasty little biter. Was
this just a behavioral problem? Is he autistic? Yeah.
No, behavioral.
Okay. Got it.
Just a behavioral problem. And there was another little kid who liked to hit.
Yeah.
In that classroom. Again, just a behavioral issue. She had no problem with them.
Right.
Because she knew them. It's okay. I can understand those kids. They don't talk funny. They,
Yeah.
So, yeah, if I tell them not to do it, we all know they're going to do it again, but at least I know they heard me.
Yeah.
Okay, so she didn't have a problem with them. She had a problem with because would spin. She would tell her not to spin. Would stop spinning.
Yeah.
But then a little bit later would start spinning again. But she can speak, she can converse, but it doesn't always sound right. She's got a weirder cadence, a weirder rhythm. And especially in this grade, she was being very detail oriented. So like, you would almost have to puzzle out what she was saying. For instance, and I'll give an example because he mentions in the book about the details. Well, that is how they see, and at least that's how sees too, details.
So the way he was talking about that, it really rang true for you. For her. Okay.
Yeah. Now they're all different.
Yeah.
And I think he points out they're all different, and she's different than others. But like for the longest time, you would have to puzzle it out because she would see like a rubber band. And she wouldn't say, I want the rubber band, even though she knew it was a rubber band. She would say, I want the pink heart-shaped object. And so you would be like, what? And then you'd look all around trying to find a pink heart-shaped object. And finally you would see, she'd point, and the rubber band had kind of twisted into a heart shape.
And that was what caught her attention.
And that's what she wanted.
Yeah.
And so that's how she would verbalize it. Or, orange slices. You cut up an orange.
Yeah.
She would call them her little orange crescent moons. She'd be like, give me some orange crescent moons.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so she could speak, but you kind of had to.
Yeah.
And,
so this is a characteristic of autism that they don't necessarily understand that everybody has agreed on using this simplest term for that thing.
Correct.
All details are even, and
Everything's
whatever's interesting at
fair
that
game.
point in time. Got it. Okay.
Everything's fair game, and you know, I mean, she's really toned it down, and she's gotten to the point where she can leave off a lot of them.
But that's learning. She's had to practice that and practice
she's had to practice it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
because it takes concentration to pick the word that everybody's
that everybody
on.
wants.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we only want rubber band.
Right.
But that's not what she sees. And actually, if you think about it, it wasn't what she saw.
Yeah.
It wasn't what I saw either when I looked at it.
Right.
It was a pink heart.
So these teachers were having trouble with her stimming, and just basically wanted her out of the school. They were having that much of a problem with it.
Pretty much.
Wow.
Yeah. But, you know, it was private school. There's not a lot of training. I mean, even people who go to training don't really go to training. I mean, you don't know it until you live it, or until you're in it day in and day out.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly. I mean, let's be honest.
So what if there were a small handful of sort of skills or understandings that you really wish you think are sort of bare minimum things that you wish all teachers had when they had a child with autism in their classroom, what would some of those things be?
Patience.
Okay.
Would be huge.
Mm-hmm.
As he pointed out in the book, again, I'm going to keep referring to it, but he keeps. I mean, did you notice how many times he said he was sorry? Like, bear with us.
Yes.
That's to a T.
See,
that child says I'm sorry more than. I don't know. I don't even know if I've ever said I'm sorry that much in my 40 years of life.
The thing that struck me so much was how often he talks about feeling bad about making other people. I'm going to read this as a quote from page 44. We can put up with our own hardships, okay, but the thought that our lives are the source of other people's unhappiness, that's plain unbearable.
That's terrible.
And I see this in here so much, and I don't know if it's because he's writing this as an adult and he has a different level of awareness.
He's 13.
Was he 13 when he wrote this?
He was 13 when he wrote that, yeah.
Okay, well then,
which makes it even more amazing,
close to your daughter's age then.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. Do you see, because it's everywhere in this book, this sort of feeling so bad and guilty because he's making everybody else's life difficult. Do you see that in your daughter? Does she talk about that?
Without a doubt. She doesn't verbalize it to the same degree that he does. Mm-hmm. But then she's not writing a book either. So, but yeah, I mean, I see it constant. I mean, there's not a day goes by that she does not apologize for something. And then sometimes you can see that she's even dwelling on it. Like, I might, she's a kid. I mean, let's be honest. They're all kids. They're all messy. They're dirty. They don't like to listen to us. And so like any typical mom, I yell, I scream, whatever. My son, I can say it, he'll move on. He goes, I'm sorry, Mom, I won't do it again, blah, blah, blah. About every 20 minutes, she'll come back, and she'll say, I'm really sorry I didn't take my shoes off before I came in the house. And then at bedtime, she'll have a little tear in her eye, and she's like, I'm really sorry I didn't take my shoes off. And you're like, and so it's hard, because you're like, in the scheme of things, you have to punish her, just like everyone else to learn.
Right.
But then there's a part of you that's like, scarring her physically and mentally for the rest of her life.
She really holds on to.
Because she holds on to. I mean, it could be weeks, and she'll say, "Remember that day I forgot to take my shoes off?"
That was another thing he was talking about. How memory, it doesn't it's almost the same thing with the details of the rubber band. Like memories are almost all sort of even, and the not liking a certain color, because you said that a few minutes ago. She's not going to want this crayon because that color reminds her of. And everything's tied to sort of an emotional memory. It's not just the kid being weird and thinking green is a weird color. There's an experience.
There's something that ties to
behind that,
yeah.
Right?
There's usually. Now, sometimes you can find it, sometimes you can't.
But it's pretty safe to assume it's there. You just may not be able to understand what it is. But
right.
This is not just the child being difficult.
No. I mean, just like I used to love sushi. I can't eat it now because when I was pregnant, I got sick. You know? My husband thinks it's stupid.
Right.
But I think any pregnant person who had that, that same thing might get it.
Yeah.
And it's the same with her and their memories. Yeah.
And
their memories are so strong.
That's what it is that with you probably even understand that I probably could eat sushi now and I would be okay. You can sort of rationalize it out. Mm-hmm. And that's the piece that may be missing for an autistic kid, that they can't necessarily say to themselves, the green crayon doesn't mean anything. It's really has nothing to do with that memory, because it's too strong.
Well, and as an adult, I can just say I choose not to eat it, and people will listen to me.
Yeah.
But when you're an autistic child, people will say, well, there's nothing wrong with this green crayon, so just leave it on the table.
That's an interesting insight. You're
I
right.
mean,
Adults
and
pretty
if I
much
were
get
an
to do
adult,
what they want.
I would get up and I would take that sushi and I would put it someplace else.
Yeah.
They are at school required to sit there at a table with 20 other kids, and all the other kids are using their green crayons. And
I'm going to say also, just for the sake of anybody listening, because I'm going to do a review of this, but if somebody's just listening to the podcast, I'm talking about this book called The Reason I Jump, and it is written by Naoki Higashida, and I'm going to be reviewing it on the website. So, because we just keep saying the book.
Yeah. Oh.
I think anybody listening is like, what are they talking about? Okay, so what else? What other things would you wish teachers would do more of?
Okay, well, there's two things. Three things. Okay, the first thing would be, along with patience of behaviors and trying to, there's always, with autistic children, I swear, I mean, I sit and I have lunch with them all the time. I mean, they are really polite. They've gone through so much therapy. Those children know how to behave. It's impulse control that they have issues with. And so, so be patient with their behaviors, but also be patient with their speech. Like we have right now, she's past all the beautiful flowery language and descriptions and all that, but I call it the guess what syndrome, because as he says in the book, sometimes it takes a lot to process a conversation. It takes a lot to get your ideas in order. You know what you want to say, but you can't phrase it. So what happens with is she'll say, "Hey mom, guess what?" And then I'll say, "What?" And then she'll go, "Hey mom, guess what?" And I'll say, "What?" My what is triggering her to have to rethink everything. So really what she needs me to do is say, "Guess what?" And then I just look at her. And then she can continue on with whatever she has to say. But if I ever answer back, I break her train of thought. And then, so what I've also noticed with a lot of the children with autism, I don't hear them say ums and ahs, pausing.
Yeah.
They're just quiet. And I think that people, myself included, breeze over them.
They get interrupted because people think they're done talking, or they're not going to pick back up.
Even though the sentence isn't complete,
right?
People are just like, as they're trying to get the rest of the sentence out, they just turn away. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm trying to imagine myself having 30 students,
right,
and having my autistic student come up and want to tell me.
It would be terrible. I
know how I am with my 3 kids, and one of them's talking and the other 2 want attention. I'm like, get on with it. You have to say it faster.
I know, and it's terrible.
So what's the best approach? Is there something that you can say to her that will...
That you can,
I don't know.
Each kid is different.
Yeah.
And I know with us, I usually try to say, if I notice that there's a long pause, I say, is this important? These are what I need to do right now. Is this more important than that? I mean, if what she is trying to get out to the teacher is, Johnny over there, just spit a whatever. I don't know what kids do in classes. That's why I'm not a teacher. But if that's something that's not really that critical, but if it's, I don't understand this and I can't continue on with my work, then they're going to have to be a little more patient.
Maybe it's a matter of, maybe the strategy doesn't necessarily have to be with that child, it has to be with the rest of the class. To say, when I'm talking to her and I signal to you, that means you need to just hang on a second.
And let it go.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. And I don't know how much speaking in the class, she really has to do, per se. A lot of it's rehearsed and scripted in it. Like they're doing small groups and then they get up and...
How's her writing?
Abysmal. She's learning to type right now.
Is she? Is that just motor control?
I personally, she was in OT for 7 years, and she still gets it through the school. She's gotten it through the school for 2 years, and it has not improved one whit. And I personally think it's visual perception. She can form the letters okay.
Yeah.
She has the manual dexterity. I mean, the things she can do with her hands. She draws these very ornate, detailed pictures. I think her problem is visual perception. Some of the letters are really huge. Some of them are really tiny. She doesn't put spaces in between their words.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've given her guidelines on how to do that. And
Yeah.
it's
just not.
It's just not happening.
So the typing is helping at all a little bit?
Well, she's just now learning.
She's just getting started on that.
Yeah.
She's in the right decade or the right era to be. Yeah, no
I know.
kidding.
I'm like, just
nobody
learn to
writes
sign
anything.
Your name,
Yeah.
just learn to sign your name, and you'll be fine. Even that's probably going to be a swipe card.
So you're right, exactly. Okay, so you said patience and.
Okay, so patience with behavior and patience with listening.
Right.
There's always a trigger. So always look for the trigger. Now, just because, and again, it's 30 kids, and I totally get that.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't do it if I tried. But there is always a trigger. There very rarely do children with autism, at least all the ones that we know and associate with, there's always some reason for behavior.
Right.
They're never one to instigate. They're very, very rarely instigators.
Right.
They're very rarely lie. I mean, I think it was just this year my daughter figured out how to lie. I was like, I thought my world was ending. I was like, oh man. For so long I wanted this development. Now I have it. And I'm like, oh. And then the last thing is if a parent is willing to help, let them help. Okay. And I know that there's, and I mean like, for modifications. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with modifications? Mm-hmm. Okay. I have asked every single teacher, she's now in 4th grade, I will be more than happy to modify anything that needs to be modified. And modifications, people don't know modifications very well. I don't think educators are trained very much.
No, that's kind of the realm of the special ed teachers, and I'm
not even sure they get that much.
They may not. They probably spend a lot of time just learning the laws and everything too, and how to do the paperwork. But specific modification strategies
is just and it's tough too, because until you spend 24 hours a day with a child or multiple children, it's hard to kind of figure out, like, I've seen modifications, and modifications for, like, my child are, so there's a test. Say there's a test, science test. Let's say there's a science test. And it's those short answer questions in the back. Mm-hmm. Okay? So what they'll do when they write these tests is they'll say, a volcano in Peru is 47 inches or whatever meters high. Right. And it's got this and that and the other. And you want to take and see what kind of rock samples do you think you could find. What about, so they might talk about the rock samples. And, they bury like 3 or 4 questions in this one little question. Mm-hmm. Well, that's confusing to someone who's got who likes detail.
She's going to get lost.
She gets lost in all those details. So, like to modify something like that, it would be in a volcano, answer these questions. And, just 1, 2, 3. That's it. And then she can answer 1, 2, 3. And you can even put in a paragraph form, and she can get, I write one whole paragraph and I have to hit all these parts. But if you just have like this random long... Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So, but see, we see modifications. When I get modifications home, like I see modified tests, it's the same test that all the other kids have. And so maybe there's a multiple choice question, and they've used a black Sharpie, and they just mark out 2 of the possible answers.
Yes. So
which is a joke, because to me that's true or false.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's visually just confusing. I mean, if you think about a paper that has all these black...
And that's a really common form of modifying, is just taking 4 questions down to 2 and making it a 50-50 chance of getting it right.
Which is crazy, because as my daughter's average intelligence. Mm-hmm. She doesn't need that kind of modification. She needs the work.
She might need it delivered in a different format sometimes.
Sometimes she just needs the extraneous... hoo-ha, no doubt.
So, we've got...
And let me tell you the last one.
Yes.
Okay. And the last one is don't ever, ever, ever underestimate them. And I mean, he proves, I mean, you're talking that, if you read more about him, he basically is unspeaking, he's... Yeah. Until he learned how to type, he couldn't communicate. Right. But, oh my gosh.
It's amazing.
I mean, he's beautiful. His prose is amazing. Yeah. Eloquent. And that's what I see the most with is that people underestimate her. Like, my problem now, I am a different parent too, because I'm kind of a sink or swim parent. There are parents who are more, when they go to IEP meetings, they request more services.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that we didn't cover. She's definitely fully, completely in the regular classroom, right? Does she get any pull-out services or anything?
She gets speech once a week where they just work on social situations, because social skills, yeah, they all have social,
right?
Just trying to, just because she doesn't get figurative language, she doesn't get idioms.
Yeah.
Somebody says, I fell and I did a number on my knee. She's like, well, what number?
Right.
She doesn't get that stuff, and so that's why she goes to speech. She gets OT twice a month, but it's in the class.
Oh, okay. They just come in and
and then she does get pulled out for math. That's the only thing. And she gets the concept. She does all grade level work in math. They just found that it's not her favorite subject, so she's a little more easily distracted. And so they pull her out to have her in a smaller classroom where there's an aide that can keep her more on task,
more focused
doing the math work.
Yeah.
Just because.
Do you have an IEP meeting every year?
Every year,
yeah. So when you mentioned a few minutes ago about never underestimating her, how has that played out? Where have you seen the underestimating, or have there ever been teachers who really got that concept and really pushed her, and you saw her really blossom under that? Okay.
I've seen when one teacher actually said to me at the end of the school year, she said, I hope I did okay with her. I mean, as far as I know, I've never worked with anyone with autism before. This was a new one for me. I just had to treat her like every other kid, and she did fine. And she did. And that year, she accomplished probably more and she was more accepted in the classroom than any other year she's ever been. And that's the thing. Especially with my child. Now, they're all different again, and every parent knows their kid better. But I'll give you an example of something that just happened recently, which I was just floored with. Went and had lunch with my child. After lunch, they all line up. And apparently they started some new thing where they all have to line up in a very specific spot, like a square. Okay?
Yeah, okay.
So they all have to have their own square. I assume it's so they're not touching, pushing, hitting, licking. I don't know. Who knows sometimes. So the kid was going down the line. There's like a little monitor who checks to make sure everybody's in their square. Check everybody. Pass. And I said, well, where's your square? And she goes, I don't know. And the kid looked up. He goes, oh, she doesn't need a square. And I was like, what do you mean she doesn't need a square? He's like, well, she doesn't have to stand in a square because, and gave me that kind of, look like, she's special need, And I said, she can stand in a square. And he goes, well, she doesn't have to, though. And I looked at it and I said, can you stand in a square? And she goes, I think so. And I was like, can you just give her a square?
Yeah.
And he goes, but she doesn't have to be in one.
Huh.
And that sets the tone.
Yeah.
She can stand in a square. She can go down to the office and pick up papers. She can do all the things the other children can do. Sometimes you might need to give her, and I get it. Sometimes you're in a hurry. You might not want to take the time to make the instructions so precise. But I think her acceptance in the classroom is going to be based on the acceptance of the teacher. And, if you create a divide, she doesn't have to have a square because she's different.
Yeah. So the teacher really could set the tone with that, where if the teacher were, because we don't know if that kid got that instruction from the teacher saying you can
or
just,
if they just them.
Right.
Yeah. And we don't know.
And so, but a teacher could sort of reinforce what you're saying by saying, if she overheard that, saying, no, make sure that is also in the square, that sort of communicating expectations in a way that's non-judgmental and
like she needs a square.
Right.
And I think that's probably the critical part, is that, especially when they start getting older, kids notice differences more. Why does this person get this and I don't? Well, and then it turns negative. I mean, we all, I mean, you remember back to and I can make some comment, I remember what kids would say, And the key is just to let them blend, and they can blend. I mean, they are such little rule followers because and again, in the book, the reason I jump, they memorize these rules just to fit in. So you give them rules and they'll do it.
Right.
I mean, they've got it down. I mean, now you do individually get personality things.
Yeah.
Because they're still kids.
Right.
But in general, you can give them a square, they'll sit in a square.
Right.
You teach them how to go take the attendance down to the office, you just do it once or twice, they'll do it just fine every other time.
Yeah.
But they're never the kids that get picked. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they know that.
They know that, and the other kids know that.
So, does she talk about that? Because you had mentioned
yeah.
when we started texting about this book, one of the first things you said is that people should read it, but then it needs to come with actionable items.
Yeah. Well,
and you talked about her feeling left out, that's an issue lately.
It is. And, one of the things I've noticed is that at the school where she's at... Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. There's shunning. It's like a form of bullying. I'm grabbing it. Okay, you better. I get this part out. Okay. What I've noticed is that children in the classrooms have they almost write them off. For instance, I do a lot of flashcards. Like, I go in and do math flashcards with all kids from all grades, just to practice. And one child was really fussing about doing these flashcards, and she's a 4th grader. And I said to her, well, you know what? Doesn't like doing these flashcards either, but it's just part of life. You just got to do them. And she goes, why does need flashcards? And I said, why wouldn't she need flashcards? She's got to learn math too. And she goes, no, she doesn't. She's special needs. They can't do anything. Now, this is, and she's speaking about a child who's in general ed.
Yeah.
So that goes to show she's not getting a clear enough picture. I mean, does the same homework that she does everything identical. We get the same workbooks, the same tests, all that. Right. But somehow she does not see her as doing anything. We used to, when she was complaining about not having friends, like, I would make little lists. In the morning, we would say, okay, so you're going to pick 3 people, and let's ask them these questions. And I said, because, we talked about how to be a friend. We've read all the friend books, Special Need Friends book, American Girlfriend book. Ask them about their favorite music, that kind of stuff. And so we would make all these little lists, and I'd send her in, and she'd come home, and she's like, nobody would answer me. And I thought to myself, I thought she was just lying because that was a new skill. So I thought to myself, okay, she's just not asking, I need to push. So one day I went and I was watching. Lo and behold, I watched. She went up and asked a child, and they literally looked at the ceiling. And then she asked him again, and she said their name, and then they looked the other way. And then she asked them a 3rd time, and then she walked away. And so...
That had to be really hard to watch.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Don't apologize. You have always impressed me so much by how positive you are and how well you hold it together. And
yeah.
And honestly, it has to be... I just always imagined that there had to be some really strong emotions behind it also. So don't be embarrassed. And I mean, I'm going to talk to you about this later, but I would want to not edit this out only because I think a parent who has a child with autism listening to this, if they only hear strong, got it together, positive, everything's fine. It's the same as when you have your first baby and you meet parents who are like, oh, she slept through the night at 7 weeks and we're having no trouble nursing. And it's like like, what's wrong with me then? If you're cool and everything's great, then something is obviously wrong with me. So I think this is what always has helped me when I have struggled with having kids or being married or anything that is hard.
Yeah.
It never helps me to hear somebody who's just like, well, here's how you do it, and it's easy.
It's easy.
It helps to hear somebody who's like, it really sucks sometimes, and it really is hurtful, and it's painful, and it's hard. Then it's like, okay, I can cope with it because I know other people have also. So anyway,
okay.
So did she try this with lots of other kids?
Oh, she tried it with several kids. And it's part of it is fourth grade.
Yeah.
Part of it, girls are mean.
Yep.
I mean, let's be honest, girls are mean. Yeah, so she tried a lot, and we're slowly trying to figure out options. Now, luckily, the school's been pretty good about helping, or about letting me do what I feel is right, if that makes sense.
Well, what would that be?
I'm going into the school every day and having lunch with her, but I'm not just pulling her. I'm pulling all the kids in her grade that are special needs. And so we have a big little party every day. And the reason being is because they're comfortable around one another.
Yes.
They're all the shunned ones.
Oh.
You know, that when you sit at the table and you sit and you see them eat. I mean, literally, I would watch her and like... if I was doing something else at the school and I could go past and she would be sitting and she'd be staring at the wall with her back to everybody and just eating. Which is heartbreaking. And, the saddest part is we expect these children to develop social skills.
Mm-hmm.
But how can they?
If no one else is receptive, and you have to help, we have to have all the other kids develop the social skills in response to them.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Because, there's only so many times I can say, go talk to someone. Yes. These are the conversation
It can't
pieces.
be all on her to do that, no.
If no one responds, there's nothing to do. Now, you talk to her, you put her with an adult, she is great. Mm-hmm. She can talk up a storm, she, even at the grocery store, she'll ask little old ladies, do you need some help with your stuff? I'm like constantly trying to rein her in because she's comfortable. And adults are good about giving patient listening.
Well, because adults have good social skills. All kids have crap social skills.
They do all have crap social skills.
I have this trouble with my second daughter because she doesn't know how to make friends with other kids. Mm-hmm. And she'll see her sister have a play date and she'll say, can I have a play date? And I'm like, okay, who do you want to call? And she can't think of anybody. And I've watched her try to have conversations. It's the same thing with her, with adults. And I'm not trying to, say that it's the same, but
all kids, yeah.
She and I can talk no problem. She can talk to our adult friends, but watch her try to talk to another 8-year-old, and it's like, what do you want to do? And they don't talk back either.
It's hard. Yeah. And it is the exact same thing. You don't want to compare. It is truly the exact same thing. And like when I was talking to the school, I said, I'm going to start this, and I'm going to start it just to help her grade and her children, because I'm hoping, the hope is that these children will start to enjoy lunch. Yeah. And they do. And they're very chatty. They're just having a ball up there. Oh, they went from little zombies, eat my food, sit and stare at, nothing. They're up there. They won't stop talking when they're up there. Yeah. When they're just in their own comfortable setting.
Yeah.
And the goal is eventually, hopefully, to get other kids, what they refer to as neurotypical, normal, whatever, to get involved.
Right.
And want to come up and spend some time with them and see that they are fully functioning children.
Right.
They just need the skills. If you look at a school cafeteria, you can pick out probably 10 kids in there who don't have a friend. And they're not all special needs. They're just lonely.
Yep. They're not
kids.
One of the things he wrote about in here, he talked about how he said we can't do the thing where you talk critically about things. And he was talking about how they only understand how to sort of describe things and talk about things being interesting or beautiful, but when people start to criticize something, like they don't get that concept of like picking people apart, or
they don't get being mean.
Yeah, and that might be a big piece to why it's hard to form a friendship, Because when I think about, when I watch my daughter interact with other kids in that grade, like, it's a lot of just like, oh, you're a doofus, and and they tease each other and stuff like
Well,
that.
and they're already gossipy.
Yes. So it's like, it's criticizing other kids who aren't there. It's teasing each other face to face. And like a lot of those, it sounded like from what he was saying, like that's a wavelength that autistic people just don't even understand. They don't understand the sarcasm and teasing, and do you know what I mean? Like that kind of humor. And that's so much of friendships at these ages are based on that.
I think they can, like I am a pretty sarcastic.
Yeah.
Really. As my son once told my mother, he said, "That's okay, Mama. Don't worry about Mommy. She just likes to mess with people's heads." When I was being sarcastic. So, she gets it. She gets it.
Yeah.
And she gets it from me, but she only gets what she's used to. But what she doesn't get is that emotionally charged. Like, there's a difference between just sarcasm and kind of random teasing than that emotionally charged teasing. If you know what I'm saying.
She wouldn't necessarily be able to pick up on the difference.
She couldn't pick up on the difference. You call somebody a doofus.
Right.
Okay, so a typical fourth grade, they're laughing about, this other fourth grader and blah, blah, blah. So they call him a doofus. Okay, kind of funny between the girls.
Right.
The guy probably doesn't really care too much. Right. But that is an emotional charge.
Yes.
She wouldn't get that.
Well,
she would think they're being mean.
Right. She wouldn't get that they're flirting.
Yeah,
basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is totally it. Yeah, we're not there.
Yeah.
But,
well, and that's so much of what they're talking about right now, too, is they're, like, making fun of each other for liking certain guys and,
And he likes her more than me, and she likes, I mean, I'm kind of glad she's not there.
Yeah, yeah.
But, that's just so foreign.
Right.
She'll never get that, I don't think. I mean, she might, but I don't know. But you know what? In a way, it's also kind of refreshing.
Yeah. Well, no kidding. Yeah. So,
because you know where you stand.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of things are very literal, or everything's very literal, right? So there's not a lot of.
Yeah, there's not a lot of wiggle room. I mean, she either and a lot of people say some of the rudest people they know are people with autism or Asperger's. I get that, and that's just because they don't feel that they need to waste, and she's this way too. She doesn't want to waste her time or her energy on something. Like, sometimes my husband will come home from working 24 hours, and he'll stink to high heaven, and he'll go to give her a kiss, and she'll be like, "You smell, don't come near me." Whereas my son will be like, "Okay, I'll take your stinkiness," which may be a boy thing, I don't know, but,
yeah.
But, I mean, not many children would most would probably kind of grimace.
Right.
She'll here's
just
my
be
cheek.
completely honest.
She'll be completely honest.
It's just not, that filter isn't there.
You are not to come near me because you stink, and I will throw a little fit if you do. Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, and that doesn't fit into the social world really.
Well, how would it? And this probably definitely would vary from parent to parent, but you could at least give me your perspective on this. 'Cause I'm trying to think of ways that teachers can help with the whole idea of strategizing with the class as opposed to trying. If you found out that one of your daughter's teachers had a meeting with the class while she was pulled out for something to educate them a little bit about autism, and this is why she does this sometimes, and this is why she does that, to help them to better understand some of the things that she does, would it appall you that they did that, or would you have preferred that they take a different approach? Would you appreciate that, or?
I honestly don't mind. And I think I would ask her if she would like to be in the class.
Would it be uncomfortable for her, or would
I don't know if it would be or
on
not.
the spot like that?
See, I don't know. She's funny.
Yeah.
Because she knows that she's different and she doesn't want to be different. So she is kind of funny that way. But I mean, as we're pretty laid back about it. We're like, you're autistic, yeah. You're also, yeah. You're a girl.
Yeah. Right.
So those things. So for us, I don't know, because I don't know if she would. I don't think she would feel weird about the fact that it was autism, more so than just weird just having anybody spend 20 minutes to talk about her. But I also feel that I'm kind of in the mindset that, when you pull somebody out of the class to talk about something,
I know. I'm trying to think
it
of a
almost
way
makes it like, okay, I'm going to tell you guys this about her because,
Yeah. So it would be better to have her
yeah,
participating in it.
I mean, heck, if it were me, I would have her stand up and talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, could she at the age of 5? I don't know. Probably not. But she could participate in some way. And I think she could participate even now in some way, maybe not to the same degree. Mm-hmm. But you run into a risk, and especially in the public school system, there's lots of kids in one classroom. Mm-hmm. And there's more and more being diagnosed. So, I think in her classroom now, there's 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. So would all parents agree on the same thing?
Right.
I don't know. So...
Because it seems like a lot of kids, I think this is probably true for a lot of people in general, they want to do the right thing and they don't know what that is. And you were saying before too that people are more comfortable with things that they know and understand.
Mm-hmm. I completely concur.
And a lot of kids, because I've heard my own kids just use the term special needs. They'll say, "Oh, he's special needs," and you're right. It's used as a catch-all excuse for pretty much an explanation for any kind of
anything they do. I mean, my God, they could be dirty and it could be special needs.
But the thing is, all the kids in class know who is special needs, and it's almost like that is a blank check for whether it's that they don't have to do the regular work or we excuse this behavior or whatever it is, and if the kids could learn a little bit more about individual, it almost seems like each teacher needs to have the whole class, get to know the whole class very well at the beginning of the year. So whether it's food allergy or if it's a diagnosis of autism or if it's, I'm just really quiet or whatever, then that would be sort of blended in with everybody's individual preferences and needs, or I don't know. I just, I've heard my own kids say that exact same thing, where it's just,
I've heard my son say it.
Yeah. It sounds to me like a lot of this comes down to the individual family, individual child. So have you ever had a teacher at the beginning of the year, because you were talking about this sort of extensive document that you prepare every year for the new teacher. Have you ever had a teacher approach you and ask you questions about your daughter, and what's the best way to...
Never.
How would that make you feel?
It would
if they set up a meeting and asked you, said, I want to get to know her better and understand,
I would think that would be great. I just don't think they have time, honestly.
Right.
Let's be honest. I give them the document just because I'm hoping that among the several thousand other pages of stuff they have to fill out at the beginning of the year, they might take the time to read it. They've got 30 kids. Mm-hmm. 30 kids that they learn about. Mm-hmm. Generally, my daughter and a lot of the children who function at about the same level she is, they can cope. They can sit in their desk and really not be a problem.
Otherwise, they probably would not be
where they're at,
fully mainstreamed the way they are. Right.
So they just get, they'll never get to know her per se because they've got 29 other kids.
And that's in elementary
that
school.
Are demanding
She's in middle school, they'll have 130 other kids.
Yeah, exactly. And those kids demand attention. Those kids are the kids that when you sit down at a lunch table, they're like, whereas you sit down at a lunch table, she might look at you and say hi.
But at the beginning of a school year, if I'm a teacher and I get a list of 30 kids and 2 of them, I'm assuming, I'm told at the beginning of the year through the IEP that should show up at the beginning, that she's autistic, that maybe this would be a time to even just send you an email and say, hey, I've got your daughter. We're starting in a week. What can you tell me about her?
Oh my God, that'd
start
be
a
fantastic.
dialogue.
Yeah. I would say that most of the time, most parents whose children are in a mainstream situation, I would assume, would be very responsive. Mm-hmm. How's that? Is that a nice politically correct statement?
Well, the thing is, I can't imagine, as a parent myself, I can't imagine reacting negatively to getting that.
No, I can't.
Kind of an email just saying I want to get to know your child better, and that there are probably some real neutral ways of asking some introductory questions that can get the ball rolling at least. What do I need to know about her personality? What are some, and it sounds to me like things sort of change and evolve over time. So it sounds almost like the question should be, where is she right now? Like on,
Yeah. What's she doing? And yeah. But you know what? Here's the thing. You could have students do that. I mean, I've done lots of research. I've done looking, and, they always say that actually in a truly inclusive classroom, in a truly inclusive, which is socially and just academically inclusive classroom, the students who are typical perform better, as do the special needs students. They all perform better academically. And the reason why is because the typical students are so involved in helping those special needs students stay on pace.
Yeah.
That they're reaffirming. They're doing the work again. They're helping.
They're teaching it, and it's getting reinforced.
It's almost like a Montessori kind of principle, right? The older, builds up the younger. Well, in a truly inclusive classroom, that's what they say happens, because those students are really working together. They understand. They're going to understand the quirks of the other kids. They're going to understand that for some reason, my child cannot, for the life of me, we have not figured out why, cannot figure out the difference between odd and even. They're all numbers. She doesn't care about odds and evens.
Yeah.
But, she can calculate the perimeter and the area and do all that other stuff. So she has weird chunksing. Kids who work with her would know that. Kids are good that way. They can, if they work together, they're going to find out more about one another. I mean, you always, that's why they put kids in small groups, small groups, isn't it? Small groups. I don't know what the new lingo is. Small groups, whatever. Yeah. They put them together in that so that they can learn to work with different personalities, right? So if you can really start at the beginning of the year pairing these kids up, making them work in small, and I know that they do some of that, but I don't think it's as structured. Like I knew, I was reading about a teacher who once, every week she had the kids write something about, their favorite thing that happened that week, the worst thing that happened that week, how they're feeling. Like it was like one of these parent letters, but apparently it wasn't a parent letter. She took them all, and then that next week she would match up who needed a friend, who was in a fight with who. And
this was just on Facebook not too long ago.
Yes, but I read that.
She had the kids basically tell who who didn't sit with anybody at lunch. They were almost reporting on the kids who were most needing.
And they were blending, and she was able to maneuver that. Because there are kids, like, I laugh all the time because my husband's like, you're like a hawk just searching out prey, because you can pick out which kid would be a good friend. You're like, that's the type of personality you need. You need a patient personality. You need, and the teacher can control that a little bit better.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they can really pair them up and really start to push those.
Because sometimes that really caring, nurturing personality also doesn't do well with the doofuses and the gossipy girls, and they don't like that either. So it's a good.
And so you can. I mean, it almost sounds like what. Brave New Worldish. You can create your own.
You're manipulating social.
Yeah. You can. You can.
But that's part of I think that's part of the job of a good teacher is not just letting the chips fall where they may every time. Is helping kids discover opportunities, basically,
right.
and grow, and they can grow from interacting with each other
completely.
So much. I'm almost, when I was talking a few minutes ago about the idea of talking to a class, pulling the kids out, I almost think that as part of the guidance program, they could choose a group. Say you got a school of 500 kids. You could choose a group of 100 kids in different grade levels, or maybe just 4th and 5th graders or something, who exhibit that kind of sensitivity and patience, and they could be trained a little bit. They could be taught about what autism is. They could be taught about some of the things they could read this book. This book's not hard to read.
No.
Do you know what I mean? To where they would almost be kind of trained as ambassadors, and they wouldn't be a publicized thing, but where they're really well educated, basically.
Funny you mentioned that.
Really?
Yeah, well, because we've been having so many issues, we have had discussions with our guidance counselor.
Really?
And part of what we discussed is the student team. I have specifically requested. Now I said the kids still need to get up and make their speech. They still need to do whatever. But I've requested. I'm like, they're a huge percentage of the population. So why aren't they on, the student council?
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, they are a
Yeah.
population.
Yeah.
And so they're looking into including that.
Right.
And then next fall, I'm going to come in and I'm going to lead, it's going to be a community service organization. And we're going to pull the kids that we think are, we're going to pull the fringe. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yep.
Not all the fringe, but we're going to pull what fringe we can because
Mm-hmm.
it's just me. And we're going to start with just 5th grade next year. And out of class, one day a month, one day, I don't know. We haven't quite worked out the details. And those kids are going to decide upon a community service project.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have to plan it. They're going to have to organize it. They're going to all have to work together. And then we'll go on a little field trip and do whatever community service.
Yeah.
And it's a way to get all those individuals working together,
Mm-hmm.
if you see, in
Mm-hmm.
something that's a little more fun. So that's what I'm working on over the summer, to try
Yeah.
to get that into, yeah.
That's really cool.
Well, we'll see. It could be really, it could
That's
backfire.
I think
But the
ideas
fact is,
like
is
that
at
are
least we have to
great.
try.
Well,
Right?
because I think a lot of times I think it goes back to this idea of crossing out 2 questions on a multiple choice. The modification. It's just something we've always done, and we don't have any other new ideas. So let's
Yeah.
just do that. And when someone comes up with something else that's creative, you should try it, because that could be a really great
could
piece
be
of the
it.
puzzle.
If the kids can all fit together, you know, yeah.
Have you had any pushback from this whole idea of pulling fringe kids together? If anyone saying, "Oh, that's going to make them more ostracized by lumping
More
them all
fringed?
together"? Right.
You know, I struggle with that. I do struggle with that. Now, the interesting thing is when all this started, you know, I started pulling all the kids at lunch.
Yeah.
We started having kids ask to join us. I mean, it
Uh-huh.
started off 4 kids because I knew. I mean, obviously, if you're a parent in a school and you're involved and you have a special needs kid, you pretty much know all the kids
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
But I knew 4 that my daughter had specific contact with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would pull those 4. And we
Mhm.
would just, and like one of them, I mean, I kid you not, she is so smiley every day. I mean, literally, I'm attacked in the hall when they see me now.
Yeah.
Because they're like, "You're here for lunch again. I'm so excited." But the interesting thing is the group is growing. Like, I don't know. It was like a week after it started, a little kid came up and goes, "Can I just come sit with you too, please?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I think we're now up to like 8. And it just
Wow.
keeps growing. And sometimes
Yeah.
they're, you know, one little girl is just a lonely little girl.
Right.
She's not in special needs.
Right.
She's just lonely.
Yeah.
And so she just wants to come up too. Now the sad thing is that, you know, it could be so much more because there's so many other kids.
Yeah.
There's a boy in their class who would be considered severe
Mm-hmm.
autism, non-communicative.
Yeah.
He's there. You know
Yeah.
he just hasn't found a way to speak, and you
Yeah.
know he's just miserable. And I would like to get him up, but then then I'm starting to really, I couldn't control the group. So
Yeah.
I have to keep it like 8 or less, because otherwise then they get lost. I mean, the whole purpose is that they socialize,
Right.
and I can't monitor more than 8.
But it does. I mean, I think it should spark an idea with other people that maybe he doesn't have to be at the end of his lunch table by himself. They may be able to rearrange some seats so that maybe he could be put together with somebody else who's gonna.
Or the saddest thing, just ask kids to say hi to him. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, that, that's the thing that I'm always amazed at. Because, I mean, if you read the book, The Reason I Can't Jump,
Yeah.
and then you're sitting there thinking, and this man, or boy at the time, was
Yeah.
non-communicative.
Right.
Except through typing.
Right.
And you think, how often did people talk about things in front of him? How often did somebody say, "Hi,
Yeah.
whatever your name is."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How are you doing today? If you have a conversation with someone, yeah, it's not easy because nobody's responding back.
And it may be that the aide who works with that kid can help other kids learn how to interpret anyway. How do you communicate? Because that label of non-communicative, I'm guessing his parents know how to communicate with him. And do you know, like...
Obviously. And he comes in, sits down, eats his lunch.
Yeah.
He has learned that.
Right.
So you can't tell me he doesn't know. there are barriers for children with autism. All children with autism have barriers. Either it's the sensory issues, the processing,
Right.
there's barriers. But if you see one and they're functioning in society, even if they're not speaking,
Right.
can you have a conversation? No.
Yeah.
But you can say hi. You can tell her that she looks pretty that day. There's all those things.
Just letting them know that you see them, know
Yeah.
they're there, you're happy that they're there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway, my 2 cents.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much to Leigh for giving me your time and for being willing to have your story shared. I think it's going to help lots of people. If this is your first time hearing about cult of pedagogy, I would strongly suggest you come on over to the site, www.cultofpedagogy.com, and you're going to find all kinds of fantastic stuff for teachers. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great day.